the January 25th, 2022 special meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education is called to order. Present we have Ms. Rotelli, Ms. Jacobson, Ms. Guernsey, Mrs. Gerber, Superintendent Cummings, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Maxincanelli, Mr. Peterson, and Ms. Kelly. I ask you all please rise for the pledge. This is the second of the Board of Education special budget meetings. We will be voting on the budget on Thursday at our regular meeting. At this time, I welcome any members of the public who would like to give comment on the budget to come forward. I just ask you name and address for the record. Here. Just have a seat, and there's a button on the mic that you need to press when you speak.
Like this? Ooh, funky. Todd Chandler, 65 Hilltop Drive in Southport. My wife made me promise that I would read from a script and not go off script, because I am often able to do. So good evening. As I said, my name is Todd Chandler. My 3 sons all graduated from Ludlow, and my 16-year-old daughter is currently a junior there. My wife and I also attended Ludlow and Fairfield High School. I'm a project manager by trade, which means I focus on understanding what a problem is, providing solutions, and providing backup solutions if the first ones don't work. We have a problem that is solvable if swift action is taken. Ludlow currently has no working scoreboard on Taft Field, and the first games will commence in just over 50 days from today. This scoreboard has been malfunctioning since my son was a freshman in 2013. And we need a plan, or if a plan exists, that needs to be publicized and transparent to address this problem. It is my understanding that the scoreboard cannot be fixed at this time. To be clear to everyone, games cannot be played without the vital knowledge of game time and score for the players and coaches, without that scoreboard. That's the short-term problem. Our long-term problem is that we need a new scoreboard, obviously, and badly. There are major equity issues here, and I'm not talking about the brand new 4 scoreboards that Ward has on their fields. I'm referring to the fact that the Ludlow scoreboard is a male-only football scoreboard. Any non-male athletes who play soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, or any other sport gain nothing from seeing what down it is, how many yards they have to go, or where the football is on the field. It's 2022, and we should all be doing better than this. The rest of Fairfield County has certainly moved ahead, and it's time Fairfield does as well. I ask the board to please act as quickly as possible to address both the short term of the unusable scoreboard and the long-term need for a much-needed upgrade, and please do not reallocate the funds as has happened in years past. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Would anybody else like to give comment at this time? You don't have to give your address, just your name.
Hello, my name is Art DaCosta. I am in 3rd grade. Math is my favorite subject in school, and I enjoy math very much. The questions I get in my class are quite easy. Mostly I finish early and read while I wait for my friends. I wish I could get more challenging questions. I've heard good things about the Math Academy, and I think it will help kids learn advanced math. I request you to continue the Math Academy. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Hi, my name is Sahar DaCosta. I'm in 3rd grade. I like to do math. I find math in my class fairly easy, and when I'm done with math in my class, I help other kids in my class. I think Math Academy could challenge me and other kids to learn advanced math. So that's why I think Math Academy should stay open. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for giving comment tonight.
Good evening. My name is Selina Strong. The students in Math Academy have special needs that are finally being met. They get 90 minutes of math a day, which gives them accelerated learning. Together, they are happy to finally be challenged, and they are no longer bored in school. They like to be challenged. They're focused on what they love and they do best, math, so they are reaching their full potential. Math Academy is unique and must not be eliminated because future students will need it as much as the current students do. Math Academy students are learning how to solve complex problems at a young age. Gifted students will keep learning and working on solutions to the complex problems of our future, all of us. They are an investment, so please, please fund the Math Academy for the coming year. Thank you.
Sorry, could you just state your address for the record, please?
1185 Stilson Road for 44 years.
And I forgot to just mention, there's a time limit. Mrs. Gerber, will you keep the time?
Good evening. My name is Matt Boland, 190 Sterling Street in Fairfield. Actually feel a little awkward here, but I understand this is a budget meeting, of course, but I have a topic that I feel needs to be addressed.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We only take public comment on agenda items, so if it's not related.
All right, well, I feel I have the floor right now.
Sir, I'm sorry. You have the floor if you are willing to give public comment on the Fairfield budget, which is an agenda
Yeah.
item. And
I just want to talk about.
This rule is just to keep it equitable to all of our commenters.
Right, I understand that,
Okay.
but I'm just trying to redress my grievances here.
I appreciate that, but that's not the purpose of public comment at this meeting. So if you would like to give.
Okay, so what is the purpose?
The purpose of public comment is for the board to get feedback from the community on the agenda, which tonight is the 2022-2023 proposed budget.
All right, I'd like to be heard, though.
Well, I'm sorry that this is the board's meeting. It's not a public forum for just airing of grievances. If you would like to.
Seems like a public forum to me.
I appreciate that, and it does get to be confusing, but if you're not willing to, well, if you're not here to give comment on the budget, I would ask you to yield the floor to any members of the public that are here to speak about the budget.
Well, I'd like to be heard.
The superintendent says he would be willing to speak to you, so you can speak to him
Okay,
directly.
that works.
Okay? Thank you for your understanding. Any members of the public like to give comment on the agenda?
Good evening, Board of Education. My name is Grayson von Blumenfeld. Today, I am here to speak again for Math Academy, a well-designed program for elementary students who need harder math. Is it possible to teach all students at all levels in one class? No, I do not think that it is a one-size-fits-all approach. The reason is some kids are ahead of their grade level. The special needs of the gifted child have received much less attention than those whose difficulties fall at the other end of the bell-shaped curve. Because giftedness is not a disorder in need of treatment, but something to be fostered, sometimes students like us are not fitting in socially because their intellectual skills set them apart from regular classes. Peers can sometimes be less supportive of a child who knows the answers to every math problem before anyone else does. In other classes, we may be so far ahead of our age mates that we already know much of the curriculum before it's even taught. Our boredom sometimes makes us not interested in class. We need special education to fit our group as well.
At the last Board of Education meeting, I stayed for a bit longer after public comments. I heard about the literacy program and the budget was so high for each student, but the Board of Education has been thinking about stopping Math Academy. Math Academy is the same as any other special needs program. We need it just like some kids need a special program to help fit their needs. In my previous classes, I felt out of place or worried some people would judge me. That is the same for any other special needs student. We all need this support no matter where we are on the bell-shaped curve. We are equally important as students and we need special attention. Who needs special attention? Math Academy is the only outlet in Fairfield elementary schools for kids like us to obtain harder and deeper learning. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else? Do we have anyone on the line? Okay, we're going to go to our callers that are on the line. Ms. Cohen, the floor is yours. Hopefully you can hear us. 3 minutes, and please state your name and address for the record.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. This is Randy Cohen at 200 Lloyd Drive in Fairfield. Oh. Hello?
We hear you.
Hello?
We hear you. Ms. Cohen, you can give your comment. We have been hearing you.
It looks like she muted herself. 1 second.
We'll wait. Is there another caller on there? We'll circle back to Ms. Cohen while she addresses her technical difficulties. Next caller. Ms. Keyes, the floor is yours.
Hi, Abigail Keyes, 179 Fairview Avenue, Fairfield. Thank you again for all the time and care you give to our children. I'm speaking again about Math Academy. I've heard some reservations and I'd like to ask some questions. Does Fairfield Public Schools fund varsity athletics? Does it pay for coaches, facilities, transportation, equipment, uniforms, any of those things? Is varsity football for all kids? Is it for most kids? Do some kids or their parents think they should be on the team yet don't make it? Do some talented athletes choose not to be on the team due to transportation, academic, or family obligations or other considerations? Does that make it unfair or create equity and access issues? Can it have a huge positive impact on those that participate? Is the value it creates so great that it's worth addressing and mitigating those issues rather than shutting it down? Do you support continuing varsity athletics? Math Academy is not for all kids. It isn't for most kids. Does that make it unfair? Does that make it create equity and access issues? Is it fair for kids to sit waiting to learn math instead of getting appropriate level instruction? Is it fair to expect the most capable math students to completely skip a year of instruction rather than providing it when they're ready for it? Those that have and can may get outside math support or move to other districts or private schools. Those that have less and can't won't and will be left all on their own. Math Academy is most important for them, and to avoid that equity problem, it needs to continue or be replaced by an alternate, robust elementary math acceleration option. Math Academy works because it leverages the economies of scale we have in our large district. It is the most efficient and cost-effective way to provide the needed math education. If there are other educationally and fiscally responsible options, they have yet to be proposed. The cover of the superintendent's budget has a wonderful John Dewey quote: "Education is not preparation for life, education is life itself." Prior to Math Academy in the lower grades, many of those kids' experience of education was waiting to be heard, waiting to be taught, and waiting to matter. That is not a life I wish on anyone. Ms. Rotelli, when you implored your fellow board members to consider the mental health of children and advocate for all children, did you really mean all children? From your heartfelt plea, I trust you did. And I ask you and your colleagues to listen to your words from the January 11th meeting in regards to the Math Academy kids. Please advocate for all children. The Fairfield Public Schools Equity and Diversity Statement begins. Fairfield Public Schools is committed to providing a high-quality education which supports the needs of all learners. Words without actions do not make a district that values equity and diversity or educating all learners. Canceling Math Academy is saying only kids whose parents can afford outside math support or private schools deserve math at the level they're ready for. It's the antithesis of equity and the so-called mission of the district. Is that what you stand for? Please live up to the stated values of Fairfield Public Schools and continue Math Academy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. I wonder if we can remind callers and other commenters that this is not an opportunity to address board members directly or by name.
Mr. Peterson, I was just about to say that. Public comment is for the board, so please address the board as a whole for any additional comments that are being made tonight. Is there any other callers on the line besides Ms. Cohen?
I'm unmuting Ms. Cohen, and then we'll circle back to Howard.
Okay, thank you.
Hello?
We can hear
Can
you.
me?
We can.
Okay, I'm going to try.
Okay.
Okay, this is Randy. Hello? Okay. This is Randy Cohen at 200 Lloyd Drive in Fairfield. I'm speaking about Math Academy. Mainstream learners have a curriculum matched to their learning speed and style and plenty of peers to learn with. Struggling learners receive pull-out and push-in services to maximize potential. Rapid learners are asked to sit and wait. Math Academy has transformed our children simply by finally including them as learners. They can go to school and be challenged just like other kids. They're gaining confidence from persisting through failure. They're learning to collaborate through working with others at a similar learning level so the problem-solving work can be shared. This accelerated curriculum is clearly the appropriate one for them. So let's find a way to bring it back to the home schools before ending the program. The educational team had a plan to work on that this year, but no option has yet been found. Therefore, the stated goal of moving the program to the home schools so all students can benefit is not actually happening. Instead, the program's being terminated and no one can benefit. The acceleration option's being removed. The identified children are being returned to educational restriction. Future students will be forced to learn math at a speed that's 2/3 or less of their capacity, a situation we would not accept for any other learning group. The educational teams recognize that these students have different learning needs. Surely the preference is that those needs be met. Some believe that better differentiation can provide the answer. In this case, the book Developing Math Talent, the only comprehensive parent-teacher guide for developing math talent among advanced learners, written by 2 nationally recognized math education experts, recommends 2 one-hour blocks weekly of separate instruction to replace the usual math curriculum. Our teachers and math specialists are already stretched thin. Won't we need to hire instructors if this amount of time is required for each child? What curriculum would the instructors be providing to these children? Also, how can the kids learn cooperative work if they're the only identified student at their school? Until these questions are answered, I'm urging the educational team and the board to follow your hearts. Remember the faces of the kids who came before you and pleaded with you to keep this program. All they want is for other kids like them to have a chance to learn in the classroom. On a separate note, Math Academy was created as a way to address racial imbalance at McKinley School, and it could still do this. Locating MA at McKinley would diminish the racial imbalance numbers by about 3%, and if MA were expanded into 2nd and 3rd grades, it could move McKinley out of imbalance, at the cost of needing to relocate 90 or fewer students from McKinley to a neighboring school. I'm not attached to that specific plan, but we should ask the consultants to include Math Academy in their scenarios as a rare source of students willing to change their school. This would minimize or possibly even could eliminate the need for other students to be forced into doing it. And that would be a win-win. Thank you.
I thought you were past the Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Mr. Stupak?
Do you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'm just Howard Stupak, 25 Osborne Lane in Southport. I just wanted to advocate as a parent of a high schooler, a middle schooler, and elementary schooler for improving the facilities of the fields, the turf fields, the scoreboard, like Mr. Chandler said, repair is needed, and then to advocate for improving the locker room and weight room facilities at Ludlow to have it be with increased parity with Ward High School. To me, the number one thing that I think the students of the town would benefit from is more turf fields, and to try to expand that. So I just wanted to use my minute to advocate for that to the degree that I can. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anybody else on the line?
That is it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to discussion of the superintendent's recommended 2022-2023 budget request. To begin, we will address any outstanding questions from our last meeting. We can swing back to that. I know that we'll just start there if there's anything open. If there's any follow-up questions on the questions from last week. And of course, you can ask later, but just if there's anything that needs clarification before we get into the budget. Okay. Seeing no hands up, we'll start moving on. And of course, if something comes up, you can always ask. So we're going to start with review of section on contracted services. That begins on pages 40 to 41 and also the accompanying pages. Ms. Jacobson?
Mr. Cummins, can you just walk us through how the town transferred these items from the town side of the budget to the BOE side of the budget and how that happened?
I can. I think Mr. Papa George was lead on that conversation. I can ask him to speak to the conversations he had with town officials.
Yeah, so it was really just a conversation with the town, and they felt that it fit better underneath the Board of Ed budget because of the location of where the services are performed and who they benefit from the services. The ones in specific, salting of the school parking lots after snowstorms and crossing guards are the two big ones that I was involved with. I know there was a couple other that Ms. Laborious was involved with as well.
So are the crossing guards, who are they employees of right now?
Currently, they are employees of the police department.
So walk us through how we're going to pay them. They're not employees of ours?
They're not employees of ours.
So we're funding a police item on the BOE side of the budget of a town side object?
No, so the service would move to us and it would fall underneath us. So our intent was we would go out to bid for a private company to offer the service, and then we would take it up.
So all the crossing guards might be replaced?
They may be replaced. We would obviously push for the company to hire the existing guards that are already in place, but it's totally up to the company at that point when we go out to bid who they would use.
So is this 193 number for that what the police are currently paying? And do we have a guarantee that that would be the same number?
We took that number from the police department's budget from last year, and we escalated it based on the escalation that they've used over the years. There is no guarantee that that number would stay the same, but that was our best options available for coming up with that number.
So we haven't had any actual conversations at this point with any of these contractors that you're looking at in terms of a number?
The only contractor we had a slight conversation with and found out if it was something that was doable was the company that currently has the town bid for the guard greeters at the 2 high schools.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mrs. Gerber?
Yeah, just a follow-up question. At any point, and I know I may be putting you on the spot here, but do we know at any point was this under the Board of Ed budget, or has this always been a town side item, to the best of our knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, it's always been a police department item, and we've always done a small balance transfer to the police department to help offset the cost.
And what was like approximately that amount?
Out of the $180,000, we've done approximately $10,000 a year.
Okay. All right. So we're going from 10,000 to 190 something thousand.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Mr. Peterson, followed by Mr. Asa.
Just for clarity, there are various private schools around town that use crossing guards. Those are not falling under this umbrella.
They actually would fall under the umbrella, so we will have to negotiate with them a fee or service to provide this service continuing.
So we're going to ask private schools that have current crossing guards to reimburse us for the costs that we're expending.
We haven't fully had that conversation with them yet, but that was our intent when we started looking at this. I don't know if they currently do it with the police department or if it's something the town has just offered to as a service.
Do we have any sense of what proportion of this spending is for private school crossing guards?
I do not. I don't have with me, and I can get it to you, the full list of where the posts are with crossing guards and which ones are serviced by private and which ones are for public schools.
And I imagine from the private school standpoint, I don't want to disadvantage any of the private schools, because I imagine if this has gone through the police department in the past, then background checks may have been part of the process, correct? So
Absolutely.
We're still providing that service for a private school that may not otherwise have the resources to, or may have the resources. But trying to be charitable. All right, I was not nervous about this. I'm a little more nervous about it the more we've gotten into it. We'll just
I can tell you, when we put something out to bid such as this, or our guards, anyone who's going to be working within the school system, we put in the bid that the company that is doing the hiring is responsible to provide to us at request a background check for any employees that are in a school building or servicing the school children, such as a crossing guard.
Oh, no, I wasn't suggesting at all that we get rid of that. That's a necessary, absolute necessary service. But thank you.
Mr. Asa?
So, Mr. Papageorge, can you confirm, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the practice of most surrounding districts is to handle this themselves correctly, not through the police department?
I did reach out to a couple districts. I had heard that it was handled through police departments and local government agencies, not specific to whether it was police or Board of Ed that handled it.
Okay, and we would not be employing these people directly as W-2 employees, is what you're saying?
Correct. They would just be similar to our high school guards.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Maxicanelli?
First, I would like to just piggyback on Mr. Peterson's question. I would be interested in knowing what the breakdown would be of how much they'd cost for those stationed at the private schools versus here. Again, in a tight budget, I'd rather know the information, and then we can decide what we want to do about it. But to the point of the personnel and recruitment expense and that correct teacher residency program, I was wondering if there has been any change, and Paul, I did not submit this question, if there's been any change since last year's discussion when our central concern had been that there was nothing that guaranteed a return on investment with that, if they've made any changes to that program to strongly encourage the loyalty of at least a few years in exchange as part of that program. Has anything changed?
Excuse me, I'll answer that. And that was, I think Ms. Jacobson might have submitted that question. Somebody did submit that question. No, there's been no change in that.
Follow up?
Ms. Jacobson?
Last time we spoke, and in our grant proposal, it says that there's a 3-year commitment, and you confirmed last time. So it is a 3-year commitment to stay.
It's a 3-year commitment to stay, but what I was trying to say is that it's still very much an honor system. Indentured.
So the way I understood the answer in my question was that, and in how it's written in the grant proposal, is that it reads as if they're going to be staying with us for 3 years. So you're saying that it's not a guarantee.
No, I don't think it is a guarantee, and I think this is, we'd like to think that the work we're going to do to prepare somebody will lead to a highly successful teaching career in Fairfield for quite a long time. But I think one of the other things we have to keep in mind is that every year we hire new staff with the hopes that same hope, and we make decisions during those first few years of teachers' employment that this may not be the best fit. So our goal would be that, but I also want to make sure that the school district has the ability to not only hire, but then retain the best folks.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Jen, I didn't mean to take your floor. Okay. But between the grant position and the one that's in this budget, it's not just these numbers, right? So it's the total of $107,000 that we're putting into these two people. Including the salaries, including the fee to CREC, which is $10,000, the books and materials for their coursework, and the 2 laptops that we're providing. Right. So the total of all of that together for these 2 positions that we're investing is over $100,000 with no guarantee that they have to stay with us.
That's right. And and I think you forgot, I just want to make sure there's the mentor stipend as well. So I just want to make sure that we include that. I think it's $12,000 if I remember right. You are in the large part, Ms. Jacobson, you are correct. Now, I will point out, and I don't have that with me, but I know that last year a lot of this was offset by different funding sources from the state, but again, whether we get that again or not, we do not know.
Ms. Mascanelli, any other questions? Any other questions on contracted services? Okay, moving on to revenue. It's pages 9 to 25. You may, Ms. Jacobson, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to keep coming back to the excess cost reimbursement. There's a $478.5 thousand reduction in our excess cost provision. Can you just walk us through one more time that reduction? Question was, is that due to less students being eligible to receive it under the criteria, or is that due to not enough funding from the state to cover what we should be due?
I apologize, Ms. Jacobson. Is that from the revenue page you're asking? The totals?
So on page 16, we are going from 4120 in this year's budget to 3642.
Hi, Rob Mancusi, Executive Director of Special Education and Special Programs. The decrease in reimbursement is largely due to our per pupil increased by like $7,000 or $8,000. So that's lost revenue per student who qualified. So the amount of eligible reimbursement was lower.
Okay, so it's the 4.5% threshold that in the formula that's the issue for us. Okay.
Correct.
Any other questions on revenue? Mr. Peterson.
I just wanted to follow up on a follow-up question I asked about Walter Fitzgerald and out-of-town tuition. If you could just give some color on that. We had heard, I think at one point, that we had one student, and you may or may not know, but a Board of Finance member asked about this during the capital planning workshop we had a couple weeks back.
Yes. What I would say at this time, and we can speak later, we are working with, promoting our program to accept tuition students. The board 3 or 4 years ago, when we determined or decided that we were going to, seek tuition students, set aside 5 placeholders for out-of-town students. We continue to promote our program. There was a placement there that may change based on need.
How are you actually going about marketing this? I mean, at some point, I think I had heard that you were putting together a brochure. I mean, is this an active effort, or are you just kind of hoping that calls are going to come in?
No, it's an active effort. We talk to our area colleagues at our director meetings. We are going to be scheduling an open house for our area directors and their colleagues to come visit our program.
I'm glad to hear that, since the new facility is very, very, very much nicer than the old facility. So, thank you.
Mrs. Maxwell-Kennelly.
And I just have to say, can we please get some more posters up? We had our visit there. It is a beautiful school, but there were areas that we saw for improvement. And again, we had talked about when we had our meeting at the site of speaking to the Ward Ludlow PTAs as being part of this. These are their students as well. But I'd love to see that effort be successful. And it's not nothing to be in an environment that's educationally inviting.
We are excited for you all to come return. Your input was, heard loud and clear, and we look forward to you coming to see WFC.
Now I'm intrigued. I want to see the posters. Any other questions on revenue? Ms. Jacobson.
Can I ask you a question on the SPED out-of-district tuition? When they use the per pupil number to reimburse us for that, is it our per pupil or the sending district's per pupil?
For open choice kids, yeah, we $3,000 is the figure that we use, the baseline, and then we charge costs above that.
But 167 is in excess cost, not in just regular SPED tuition. So I just want to discern between those two buckets.
Can you please refer to the page you're speaking to?
$167,000 you included in our page about the outplacements and the excess cost reimbursements. Do you want me to give you a page? It's in the back. Page 161. 167,300. I want to know if that's based on our threshold or theirs.
This is based on our threshold.
It's on our threshold.
Yes, I believe it is. I will check on that,
Can
but
we
yes.
please find that out? Because that shouldn't be the case.
I will look into that and report back on Thursday. I think that is includes,
Based on their threshold, we'd be
Yeah.
getting a lot more,
yeah.
right?
I'll look into that and clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on revenue? Yep. Ms. Mascanelli.
Sorry, I shouldn't have gotten us distracted by talking about posters when actually my question was about, we have a student now, you say that could change based on need, so I don't know if that means that the student might be leaving us and thus that's not a significant number. But I still don't understand why we are allocating nothing with one known student now.
In terms of building it into the budget
In terms of
projection?
revenue.
Did we have the student? I didn't think we had the student.
We did
committed
not
when
have the student initially when we
we
made
do
this
the budget.
projection. We will build it into the projection, once we know that the student's placement is finalized. A student's placement is finalized.
So this could be a May thing to come back to.
Correct.
Any other questions on revenue? Okay, moving on to staff salaries, pages 33 and 35. Ms. Jacobson.
I just have a question on the social workers at elementary schools that we added time to for this year and then for next year. A couple of the elementary schools that we allocated additional time to for social work, Riverfield, Sherman, and we had less social worker time. But then Tomlinson, Ford, and Ludlow and Ward had more. So did we just reallocate some of that social worker time?
So the staff that are currently there are reflective of what was proposed in the last budget. The reason you see a 1.8 add net to social workers is because of the way that the FTEs were distributed was incorrect. So we're adjusting the FTE add. There's no additional dollars add to the budget for that particular 1.8 FTE adjustment. You're seeing reductions in the FTEs on the elementary school at, I believe, Osborne, Riverfield, and Sherman. It's a full, I believe, 0.6. A portion of them are funded in the grant budget.
The social worker time in elementary schools is in which grant?
There's the portion of salaries for social work out of the IDA grant.
Oh, the ARP IDEA? Or
No, the
ESSER?
regular IDA
The regular
grant.
IDEA.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I see at Osborne Hill 0 social worker time, but we budgeted a 0.80 there, that's
That
not
is-
0 at Osborne Hill?
That is a current year change. Can you explain that one?
Do you want to go ahead? So that 0.8 at Osborne Hill was a request by the principal there to not have the social worker after a social worker retired and to increase, there was a swap with another school with some psychology time in his building. So that 0.8 was a change in the FTE there. So there is not a social worker at Osborne Hill.
Rob Mancusi again. I just want to add that the psychologists, school psychologist, social work swap with Osborne Hill and Riverfield was to decrease the amount of different staff that were here, the mental health support staff. The increase in psych time is serving, to support the kids' social emotional goals and objectives and, SEL needs.
Okay, I might just have a follow-up on that, but thank you for the explanation.
Ms. Kelly, and followed by Ms. Massinelli.
I actually had a question on. I see that to Ms. Massinelli's original question about the elementary school and middle school principals, it references that the actual line reflects the prorated distribution of the Remote Learning Academy admin salaries. Where did that money, where was that before, that it was reallocated to the principals' lines? Where did that come from?
So those funds were initially paid out of the non-lapsing account, but they were transferred into the board. The expenditures were journaled or transferred into the board budget. The board closed with the appropriate full amount that was reported for expenditures, as we did in the non-lapsing as well. So this was a distribution of the one elementary, and then you'll see that in the one middle school evenly amongst all the schools. You're welcome.
Anything else, Ms. Kelly? Ms. Massinelli?
Just a couple of cleanup items. On our original material from last meeting, I had inadvertently referenced remote learning and what are we doing if that continues, and of course that was incorrect phrasing. I'm talking about quarantine kids where we had to hire to service those students who were temporarily home in the elementary school. And so I don't recall where we budgeted for that this year, and therefore where it is reduced from for next year, as we are not planning to continue that.
Ms. Laborious or Dr. Parrish, thank you.
So the K-5 quarantine teachers are currently budgeted through the ESSER 2 grant. So that's how they're funded.
Okay, thank you. Again, as I said, cleanup question. And then, hold on. I have a question. This is D29, if that helps you. I had been questioning the regular ed paras across our elementary schools, and I understand why there was an increased need for this year because we had a few more sections than we expected. But based on enrollment projections, the number has gone back to match the projections of last year, and yet the request for regular ed kindergarten paras has not gone back to the number we requested for last year. So that's my question.
Correct. That is for the discussion for tomorrow for adjustments because that was an error. The 2.2 did increase for the kindergarten paras, and when we did the section reductions with the teachers, we neglected to reduce back down the 2.2 paras for the kindergarten level because there was a -4 as part of this budget adjustment because you just saw a one-time bump up in the kindergarten teachers.
And on the topic of the cleanup, there had been I had asked the question about lunch aids, and I believe it was Ms. Kelly had also asked about that. And in the answer to C3, it was indicated that there would be a $50,000 reduction. And then the explanation here was, yes, we can handle this cleanup with the grant, but these are regularly part of our budget. And I'm just only wondering if whatever this cleanup is that's involved, would that be included there or?
Sorry, the school lunch aids are...
Of all the questions that Mr. Papa George gets, he's ducking on the lunch aids. I find that fascinating.
He only has crossing guards. He doesn't have lunch aids.
He only has a portion of that, but because he did reduce the 50,000, we are proposing, as part of what we discussed tomorrow, to be able to, as an option, a reduction of the $50,000 for OT, as a response to your question on the OT. However, the lunch aids are part of the school-based allocations, so the principals have decided as part of their school-based allocations to prioritize that. We could have that conversation with them as well. That's an option for our discussion for tomorrow night. But right now, it's reflective of
Thursday.
Thursday.
Okay.
I apologize. I apologize. Thursday evening. But yes, right now, it's reflective of the school-based allocation request.
Okay, that makes sense. So then I guess with all of this information, would we be able to get it in advance of Thursday's meeting? And with something like the kindergarten paras, does that come out as a budget, as an agenda item of recommended staff motion, and then anything else that we might be proposing would be separate and apart from that, so that we would act on that before we act on the recommended budget, if I'm understanding it correctly? I can rephrase it if I need to.
No, I think my understanding is that, as we've done in the past, we would begin the budget conversation on Thursday with our collection, in a sense, of cuts like this, the 2.2, the $50,000 in overtime for the custodians. That was because that was mentioned on last Tuesday night. We're going to talk tonight, I hope, about the HVAC position. So there's a few things there where we can see as potential reductions. In advance of a conversation later this evening, we are looking at the Art Besser grant. So we'll begin that conversation with essentially our recommended list of potential reductions for the board, and then, as you said, the board would add to that, or perhaps not, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other, Ms. Guernsey?
Sorry, just to follow up on Mr. Cummings' explanation. When would the board receive this information then, at the meeting or prior to the meeting?
We will be working on it tomorrow and try to get it to you fully in advance of the meeting, but hopefully by tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, going back to staff salaries. Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to benefits. Ms. Maxon-Kennelly.
Just one quick question. This is really not for the board. It's more for the other town bodies. What is the time frame for when we get AON updates? So that there would be one February 1st, there would be one April 1st. I don't recall. What is the timeline for that data?
Yeah. Ms. LaBarge, can you just walk us through, I think it might be beneficial, just how you came about the number for health insurance, and to follow up on Ms. Maxon-Kennelly's question about timing, just for past budget cycles, right before the Board of Selectmen voted on their budget, very often we got new information on healthcare that in the past has been favorable for us. I know that we spoke about it in Finance Committee about potentially, lowering the healthcare rate in advance of this budget based on last year's experience. But correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'll give you the floor.
Thank you. Okay, so AON initially had recommended a 7% rate for this budget cycle. We subsequently spoke with, and they're willing to come back and speak about the trends in the marketplace, why they recommended the 7%. We then talked with the Finance Committee and went back to colleagues in Fairfield County that are also in the partnership plan, and adjusted that when we we're looking at modifying our budget ask down to 6.5%. We did learn that the state rates, when they come out, could potentially have a little bit of relief this year. We won't know that until the state rates come out in March. So for those reasons, and when we looked back at the 5-year trend, we felt comfortable with the 6.5%. And our methodology is we take all of the active staff all of the projected current retirees, projected retirees, and we take the existing rates where they are now, which would be whether they're an employee, employee plus one, or a family, and then roll it forward with the rate, 6.5%, applying the same assumptions about the distribution, the contracted assumptions about how much the employer and the employee pay. And then we apply a series of assumptions on the vacancies and on the proposed positions that are coming on board about what the family makeup will be based on past trends. And we make a small adjustment of an assumption about change to family composition for next year as well, again, based on historical trends. So doing that, I know there were some questions because year over year, the budget ask doesn't increase by the same as the rate. And you would have seen that if we hit the nail on the head last year with the budget ask, but we were a little bit overstated. So if you look at the current family choice mix with our assumptions, I think it's I can't remember the percent, but it's less than 6.5. I think, Mr. Peterson, you were asking about that. But we feel pretty comfortable with the numbers at this point in time. And I'd be more than happy to bring Aon back to talk about market trends. And they've actually offered that as well, if you'd like to. Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to be on the record in terms of that we did budget down just based on past experience. I think it's important, especially for the first selectwoman to be appreciative of that as she's building her budget, because last year we went with that higher number from the start. We reduced it down moving forward.
Yes, and we'd be happy to provide the backup detail. I think that we provided in the past that has a summary of the total numbers in each group and our assumptions, if you'd like.
Well, for me, I just want to know the time frame. So I do not need to speak to Aon. I don't need to get another Aon presentation. I just wanted to know the time frame. So it sounds like, well, it won't be ready for the Board of Selectmen vote. It would be ready for the Board of Finance vote if there's a change.
That's correct. I believe it's March. I can get the date that we're anticipating back out to you before our Thursday meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And while we're talking timeline, pension, because that was another rate that changed late in the budget cycle last year. I think really might have gotten that information after the budget was already passed. But is it a similar time frame for May, mid-May?
Yes, they have the actuarial assessment comes out around the same time every year, from what I understand. And so, yes, that would be adjusted at that point in time. We did speak to the town with our current assumptions. As much as we know at this point in time, based on a year and a half ago's numbers, which is what they base it on, at the current point in time, it should hopefully be a good number.
Thank you. Any other questions on benefits? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to transportation. That's pages 42 to 43 for those following along. Ms. McAnally.
I just have one quick question. Actually, I would direct it to Mr. Asa, and I don't know if he even knows this, so sorry for springing this on you. But I know I've seen you answer some emails or some comments regarding that the transportation system is trying to, and I don't know the proper term for it, but work out a GPS system. And is that something that, if it happens, has budget implications? Or I don't know if you could speak to that.
So we are still working on a beta of that, but the good news is that is included by First Student at no additional cost to us.
Thank you, Mr. Asa. Mr. Peterson.
Hi, thank you. I guess I'm hoping Mr. Papageorge can walk me through a little bit. I had asked a question about fuel charges, because in the executive summary you say there's a 0.2% increase based on projected increases in fuel rates, and obviously, as you added in your comments, the prices for both diesel and unleaded gasoline have gone up far more than that. Can you kind of walk me through this? I guess I don't understand if the fuel ask is only up 0.2% year to year. Does that mean that we're running a lower mileage, lower projected mileage next year? Like how can the underlying fuel costs go up 25 or 30%, and our spend in this line only go up much less than that?
Spend is going up, I think, 9.8%. Is that right? On 7% on transportation overall. But I think the comment, I actually took that from Mr. Papageorge, so I should clarify because I do think it is misleading. So I just want to be clear. The overall increase to the fuel is 60% for diesel and something like 50-something% for regular unleaded gasoline. I was trying to break out what made up the increase. So of that increase, 2.5% is due to the rate increase, and 0.2%, which is a significant amount of money, is due to fuel on the general education side. So we did, and actually we will have some small savings because we budgeted at an even higher rate than the town later came out after we developed the budget with a slightly lower rate. And so there could be potentially about $30,000 that we can present to the board on Thursday, gasoline savings. So I will amend that comment to be more clear because I wasn't intending to be, and that Angela's did all the analysis and the comment is not reflective of the reality. So
No, that's fine. Any additional detail you can give is fine. You understand the disconnect that I'm seeing
yes,
here.
I do,
All
and
right.
I see it when I read it as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on transportation? Okay, moving on to operations and maintenance of buildings, page 48 to 51. Any questions? You're looking? We do.
I think I just heard what I'd wanted to hear. It said I had forwarded to Mr. Cummings a question regarding the situation with the Ludlow scoreboard. Would this be the good time to get that report?
Excuse me, number of questions about the Fairfield Ludlow scoreboard. So, Mr. Papageorge, could you speak about kind of where we are with both the current issue and the planning issue?
Absolutely. So, just so everyone is aware, the scoreboard was working until late fall when we started having it go blank during activities or games. We've determined, we're working with several vendors, that the reason it's going blank is because of a communication issue between the actual scoreboard and the controller. The controller is basically the brains of the scoreboard. So when it loses its brain, it doesn't know what to do, so it goes blank. That being determined, there's a few options that are on the table for us, and we are
I'm
currently...
sorry, Mr. Papageorge, just to take one step back. Can you just break that down? The controller is in the press box.
Yes.
This is essentially a Wi-Fi system.
Absolutely. So the controller it's a portable system. It's in the press box. It could be run from the press box. It could be run from someone sitting on the bleachers. It's not necessarily tethered to anything. It is a wireless system that communicates between the two. Back in 2019-2020 year, we actually replaced the receiver and the transmitter between the actual scoreboard and the portable device, and that's why we were able to remove the replacement of the board off of the budget at that time because we were able to make those repairs and upgrades to it. Since then, we've determined that we are having some technical difficulties with the communications with the system, so we've worked with a few different vendors who have determined, again, that it was a communication issue, and we are looking at options to figure out if there's a repair to it or if it needs to be replaced in general with the scoreboard. I understand there's two different concerns there. The one is that the scoreboard does go blank during the game, and that's the communication error. So we're obviously, like I said, we're working on different ways to get that repaired. The additional concern there is, as people have said, it is a football scoreboard and it's on a multi-play field. So we are also looking at multiple options for replacing that scoreboard with a multi-game scoreboard. I don't know if that kind of clarifies it for you. We have multiple people involved and we have some contracts that we are currently reviewing. So I don't want to give too much detail because we do not have any signed contracts as of yet.
And can I just follow up
Follow
on
up
that?
on that, and then Mrs. Gerber.
So, and we are paying for it how and where? 'Cause I mean, speaking for myself, I am all for getting this fixed. I'm all for getting this up to date. So I'm not fighting it. I'm just wondering where the money's coming from.
That's actually part of the contracts that we're currently in negotiation with.
It's not in the budget book right now. And being that it is a contract negotiation, right, I don't want to have Mr. George share too much because it could impact how that contract is negotiated. The board, we talked about having a special meeting on Thursday to discuss some capital projects. Maybe we can add an executive session, maybe start a little bit early, add an executive session to discuss the contract to give you more detail on that, if everybody's schedule allows. Mrs. Gerber, followed by Ms. Jacobson. I'm going to give the floor 1 second. Just want to clarify that when this was in the budget, the year that it was taken out of the budget was the year that, the first year that the pandemic hit. It was $125,000 that was budgeted. We work with the town, other town bodies, to help deliver a 0% increase to taxpayers that year. So the reduction at that time, that was the context that it was made in. I think it's important for just the community to understand that this is not something that we don't care about. We haven't had our eye on it. I think this board is committed to moving it forward. And there has, as Mr. Papa George shared, been discussions to make that happen. But that is why it didn't move forward when it was last in the budget, that we were just making some pretty hard decisions, appreciating where we were. Ms. Jacobson.
So, like Ms. Vitale said, that was cut out of the budget because it was working at that time, which I can appreciate because we asked that question and we had a $600,000 cut from the town to deliver them a 0% increase on that year. So, but that we cut that because it was working. So this idea of an option being to repair something again, which is what we've already done for like 10 years already, is not an option for me. Absolutely. And, I understand that for spring is going to be in, 8 weeks. So hopefully something can be operational for that time. Not even hopefully. I hope on Thursday you have an answer in terms of how it will be operational for spring season. But in terms of whether it has to be an executive session or whatever, that the whatever it needs to be in this budget to actually replace this item once and for all, for me.
Ms. Maxinelli, no? Okay. Any other questions on the scoreboard? Moving forward to other maintenance projects. Mr. Peterson?
I just wondered, again, if Mr. Papa George could give us an update on the situation with WatchWire.
So as I had commented in the questions when you had asked, we are continuously working with WatchWire. We actually identified for them a couple of glitches with their software that they have gone back to working through at this point. And it's unfortunately, it was glitches that didn't need to be there but are there because of the year of COVID and the shutdowns. They don't necessarily cater to schools, they cater to all types of facilities. So their systems couldn't really give us a true layout because it kept wanting to bring into the mix the COVID year, and we were asking them to bypass that year because it doesn't give us a true utility watch. So they've gone back to their engineers. They're working through it so that they can come up with a solution for a way to remove a year from the actual mix when they're getting projections.
And just to be clear, you alluded to this in your answer. If we get the glitches fixed and we do sign up for this utility tracking system, just so everyone knows what we're talking about, you believe you will have some flexibility in the budget to pay the startup costs if we do go ahead with this tracker.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Asa?
Will this be an appropriate time to discuss the HVAC position?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Papageorge, at the previous meeting, I had inquired about some data analysis on justification for this position on paper, and I appreciate the response here and the questions. Working with our HVAC contractor, we're able to get a budget number of $170 an hour for an on-site service technician. Using an average of 15 hours a week, 3 hours a day, 52 weeks, comes to $132,600. I understand that's how you got to that number, but do we have data to support that that has been the trend of needing 3 hours a day, 52 weeks a year, 15 hours a week?
We're still pulling some of that information together. We use the 3 hours a day based on working with our contractor. The average, they estimate that the average repair on a system is 2 to 2.5 hours by the time you get up to the roof, take the unit apart, identify problems, maybe get parts, get back to the roof, and do the actual repair. So we figured with a 3 hour a day rate, it was approximately one repair for this contractor per day.
Okay, so I guess my question is, they should be able to look at the services that they've provided us. Is that in line with what we've seen over the last couple of years?
So the service they provide is larger repairs and fixes, which could be multi-day equipment down for repairs, and they also provide to us our preventative maintenance for the rooftop equipment. The types of repairs that we're talking about is what we've handled in-house at this point with our 2 HVAC technicians and 1 helper.
So I'm sorry, can you clarify that? Because I'm confused. It sounds like the PM contractor that you're talking to is handling the bigger repairs and we're handling the smaller, or it's apples to apples here?
No, they handle, it's a mixed bag actually, because they do handle a lot of our larger repairs and we handle a lot of the smaller emergency repairs, a call for no heat in a building, that type of, or no heat in a classroom. We have staff on site quickly because they're employed by the district to get out there and take care of that. When we identify larger repairs or replacement of large pieces of the equipment that's rooftop or even boiler rooms, we sometimes call, most of the time I should say, we call in the contractor to do those types of repairs to keep our in-house staff free to handle the emergency repairs and calls.
Okay, and from our internal employees and looking at their activities, do we have the data to substantiate the need for additional, like you said, we have 2 current technicians right now, right? So is that correct?
Currently we have 2 technician FTEs for HVAC technicians. Currently we are running with 1 HVAC technician and 1 helper because one of our HVAC gentlemen has left the district.
Okay, but we are budgeted for 2.
Correct.
So of the 1.5 or 1 plus helper that we've been using for the past fiscal year, or even going back a couple of years, however long it's been since he left the district.
Just a few months now.
Okay, so is it safe to say that we're able to produce documentation that they have been taxed enough hours to support an additional 1.0 FTE?
So we can pull up our work order system and get totals for how many work orders have been completed within the last few months. I don't know if it will give a true picture of how busy they are, mainly because I don't want to say just went into heating season, but we're only maybe entering to midway through heating season. So we do have a low period between cooling and heating season and between heating and cooling seasons.
Okay, so based on that answer, my suggestion is going to be on Thursday that we start to track this more diligently and that we start to make sure that our systems are keeping up with every single job that our technicians are doing. And I see in here that you're willing to forego the mechanic position of $85,342, which would in theory cover the vast majority of this 114 ask. I can tell you at this point, moving 2 days from now, that unless you can sway me differently, my proposal will be to cut both of those positions for a $200,000 savings. So I would look forward on Thursday or by Thursday to see compelling evidence for the need for both positions. And I say that looking down the road, that I'm not saying that I'm opposed to this position in the future. I just have to be sold on it, if that makes sense.
Understood.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Gerber?
Yeah, and I apologize for not submitting this in advance, and if you don't have an answer now, that's totally fine. Just going through the utilities with the electricity rates, I was just curious, do you know why some of the schools have significant decreases in electricity? Just curious, like if they're doing something that maybe some of the other schools could do. Like for instance, Dwight is 10.35% down. Holland Hill is less, and then others have gone up. Mill Hill is down. I think at least one of the high schools, Woods. I don't know. I was just curious if you had any sense of what created those drops.
I can look into that further and get back to you. My off the top of my head belief would be you mentioned Holland Hill, which just went to a full LED system for lighting, so there could be some savings there that you're recognizing.
I mean, it might be helpful just for down the road. I mean, especially knowing that we hopefully at some point will have fully air-conditioned schools, and you look at the non-air-conditioned schools and the air-conditioned schools, and obviously the air-conditioned ones have higher electrical rates. So if we can find other ways to reduce the budget, I mean, because Holland Hill is fully air-conditioned, as are some other schools that have seen decreases. So I was just kind of curious as to why they were there and what we can do to maybe utilize it in other places.
Absolutely.
Ms. Jacobson?
I'm just going to follow up on my standards and my levels and my priorities question. For those who want to follow along, it was, what number? G6 maybe? G6, I think. So just for the benefit of the public, we had summer projects, summer updates, September updates, and now the current updates on maintenance projects. So one thing I wanted to ask about was the North Stratfield exterior front door system that had been approved that we were supposed to be doing, but that was canceled. Now it's down to a level 2. So can you just tell us why that was moved?
That was moved down to a level 2 because we were able to do some repairs to the door system, and it is now functioning correctly.
Okay. Thank you for that. So it was a repair system, but you still think it's going to be needing to, even though it was repaired, it's still on the maintenance list as a level 2 for a future item?
It is, because at this point it's not, it's functioning correctly, but it's more of a cosmetic and rust, and so at some point down the road, sooner than later, it will need to be a full replacement.
Okay. We already talked about the scoreboard, but I also want to talk about the concession stand for a second. So we funded that, and the town funded it, and it was supposed to be done in the summer. And when I asked in August what was going on with the project, you had said that you weren't able to do it. But I just would like for you to walk us through the process between June and August and how those funds were utilized for other projects, but we didn't know about it, and just what's the process of that?
So we were unable to do the project, as I had mentioned in the past, because of material delays, manpower unavailability. So we did not do the project. So from our aspect, we turned the money back over to the finance department. And from there, we were asked down the road from that point if there was other projects that could be done because of some money available at the end of the year. So we did some end of the year spend out projects, which included a bunch of paving throughout the district, some painting throughout the district, some other repairs that could be done quickly. A couple of the larger ones were some rooftop replacement of equipment. When I say equipment, I don't mean HVAC equipment, I mean OSHA compliance equipment, such as catwalks, fall protection, that type of stuff for anyone working or on the roofs.
No, I understand the projects that were done because that's in the material, so thank you for detailing that. But my question more is aligned in terms of the process, in terms of when the town and us fund a project and you're going to change and reallocate and reappropriate the funds. Is that not something that you think that the board should?
I do feel that the board should be informed when we are not going to move forwards with a project.
And we weren't.
Correct.
In our August item, it was going to be funded in the 22-23 budget. It was not funded in the 22-23 budget. And in our January update, it's now in the 23-24 budget. So I'm trying to understand what's happening with this item that was a priority one. We funded it. The town funded it. It's needed. It's gone from level 1 and funded to a level 2 and 3 years out. So what's the decision making around that?
The decision-making for this budget was we were trying to keep fiscally responsible with the budget, with the projects, and we had identified a couple of priority projects that would be would fall under health and safety, so we moved those forwards in the budget at this time.
So all we did was reduce. We didn't add anything in place of that. Our September number was over $860,000 for next year, and now it's only at $512. So we actually cut $350,000 from maintenance projects for next year's budget.
Correct.
All right. This is probably going to be an area that I want to adjust on Thursday.
All right, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves with adjustments yet. We'll discuss it momentarily. Any other questions on maintenance? Okay, moving on. This is my agenda here. Dues and fees, is that next? Any? Okay, seeing none. Before we move on, I just want to get the board's feeling about taking a 5-minute recess before we move on to number 5, discussion of superintendent's recommended 2022-2023 budget requests and changes suggested by members. I know a lot of information was given to us at the table tonight, and maybe just 5 minutes, just so people can look through that and stretch their legs, and we can reconvene at 9:01. Any objection? Seeing none, we are in recess for 5 minutes. Okay, we're back. So we are moving on to the discussion of superintendent's recommended 2022 23, budget requests and changes suggested by members. So at this particular time, if anybody knows now that they are intending on possibly making a motion to change something, be it move it, add it, reduce it, now would be a good time to add or share that with the board and administration. Just so the board is aware, leadership has met, and appreciating that this increase is larger than in years past and that there is so much important initiatives being funded by this budget, we asked the superintendent in advance of Thursday's meeting to potentially look at the ARP ESSER funding, being that that original proposal was done over the summer. We learned a lot. Things needs to potentially have changed. At that time, we said that we would be taking another look at it as part of the budget process, and here we are. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that board leadership made that request, and it is my understanding that staff has been doing that work. Mr. Cummings, I don't know if you have anything to add before we bring it to the board for discussion.
No, only to say that's correct. That we are in the middle of doing that work. And we, as I said earlier, we would hope to have a list of the board members by tomorrow afternoon.
And again, we appreciate that, that the grant is not meant to supplant, but there are some initiatives that, could go potentially either way. So I appreciate staff taking a look at that. And with that, I'll bring it to the board for discussion for any recommended or suggested changes that you might be thinking. Ms. Guernsey.
I just have a simple one. I'll likely be making a motion to increase the music coordinator position by 0.2 to make it a full-time position. It's something that's needed in our district. Other districts in our DIRG have a full-time music coordinator. We've seen the impact on music over the past couple of years, and it's much needed. And that's a relatively small priced item. It's $17,155.
Thank you, Ms. Guernsey. Mrs. Maxon-Cannelli?
And this is not going to come as a shock to anybody, but just as a preamble regarding the Math Academy, I think the one thing that we all share in common is that we were not happy with what was suggested to the board as a replacement, which was the Challenge Academy. We didn't see that serving the purpose as a replacement for the Math Academy. If in and of itself it's something that was thought to be a useful, helpful allocation of elementary school time, that's one thing. But it is not a supplanting of the Math Academy. And just as, again, why we got into the Math Academy, we know that we have identified exceptional learners. That's not a newsflash. And that these are talents which are otherwise going to waste. We don't serve them. And I do hope that this board can get away from equating their needs for educational support with any idea of elitism. These are smart kids. We should be relishing that. We should be putting it into our district improvement plan as part of our goal. This is not something that's elitist. These are gifted kids who are not being served. They have SEL needs that we have now heard for 3 months. And that's just on this iteration of the budget, which are not being served. And that we as a district would not be enthusiastically supporting academic excellence is something that is not just anathema to me. I think it would be to this board as well. We would not see ourselves in that way. We created something that was excellent, in which students thrived, and which we are now moving to remove. What I hope all of you can join me in is that we can't go back to nothing. That's the one thing I would hope that this board would agree with, that these children whom we have identified as being underserved, whom we then served superbly, for us to just turn our back on them would truly be a shame on us moment. And so what I'm looking to do, and also there's one other point that's been raised. Well, if we serve them, why aren't we serving all of our students who have excellence in various ways, and I would argue that by and large we are. Other subjects are far easier to differentiate. ELA, you can differentiate by virtue of the text. Science and social studies, you can differentiate by virtue of the projects. Math is one where we cannot to this degree, and I would just put out to you to use your imagination, your child, your third grader, which, okay, we're all past that point. I know, we've got one. And I would just ask you, how would you feel if your child came home from school, an excited fourth grader saying, it was a great intro to school, but my my teacher pulled me inside and said, Johnny, you won't learn any math this year. You will be my teacher assistant. What parent would not be livid and otherwise outraged? And that's the position we find ourselves in if we go back to nothing. Now that said, I'm not going to go on any longer, except that again, I hope the board can support me, be united in the position that we can't go back to nothing. That said, I am not going to be one of those board members who I'm witnessed in the past, who would be on the losing vote of something and then would just keep bringing it up. The will of this board has been very clear on this. So what I'm letting the board know, I can't be as specific as Mrs. Guernsey just was, but that I'm going to be doing some brainstorming on possible ways that we can address the learning needs of these students. I'll be getting that to Mr. Cummings to price them out, and we'll be bringing, if I can do it in advance enough of Thursday, I will get it out to everybody ahead of time, but I can't promise that since it's going to involve some help from staff. But I want to try to come up with some ways that we can address what is a deficit in our education for identified children whom we know we are not going to serve if we return to nothing. And so I just wanted to put the board on notice that I would be looking to do that.
Thank you, Mrs. Maxicanelli. Ms. Jacobson, you said you were going to be looking at maintenance. Do you have anything more specific that at this particular? And Mr. Asa, I'm just trying to recap just everything else that was mentioned during the meeting, during this section.
At this point, my plan will be to bring forward cutting that HVAC position from the budget and following up with the mechanic position, both as reductions, pending what is presented on Thursday.
Ms. Jacobson?
The other question that I had asked Mr. Cummings about was, since we are delaying a large curriculum review on ELA next year, if something small could be slated into that slot. And I know in the backup questions, you'll notice that he mentioned perhaps business, and I would be interested to know if that could be assumed within whatever curriculum work we're doing already, or if that might need an adjustment, just because that would push us to 3 curriculum reviews in the next year. We've already been delayed because of science, so we're just getting off track. So if we could put something in there, I'd be interested in knowing what that would look like or if that was feasible.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Asa?
One more thing, just to the point that Mrs. Vitale made about Mr. Cummings looking at some of potential reallocations of the grant money to offset some of these expenditures. You know, at this point, I'm cautiously optimistic on that work and that being presented to us, but I do hold, you know, I don't have anything more specific to offer at this point as far as reductions, hoping that if we can find enough offsets there to make a meaningful impact. But there are some other things in this budget that we've discussed and had questions on that I will be thinking about. And you know, I just throw that out there. Nothing huge per se, but again, cautiously optimistic to see what these numbers come back with the staff work. And I just want to say thank you for that work, and I appreciate that work in advance.
And as Mr. Cumming, I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson. Go ahead. I didn't see your hand up.
Just wanted to say that, just piggybacking on what Mr. Asa said, I wanted to say that I'm gratified that administration is looking at offsets. I was very happy to hear that work is being done. The one thing that I might stress, and maybe this goes without saying, I would be hesitant about using grant money in a way that creates cliffs. So as long as we're conscious of that going into any kind of reallocation of the grant money, again, goes without saying, but I wanted to say it.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Ms. Kelly?
I also can't be as specific as Carol was, but I did want to take a look at the math textbook numbers. And so I appreciate the schedule that you gave with all the numbers and all these different options, but I'd have to put some pen to paper to get those numbers, but that's what I'm going to look at too.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Anyone else? And as Mr. Cummings said, there might just be some adjustments for things that were found as we went through the book that would also be put forward. All right. Okay. And with that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Peterson, second. Mr. Asa, all in favor? Motion carries. We are adjourned.